When I was a freshman at Urshan College, I had a sudden cardiac arrest. The EMT, nurses, and physicians attempted to resuscitate me with aggressive measures. And on several occasions, death for me was a reality. I went long, and I mean long, periods without any oxygen to my brain. But by the healing power and resurrecting power of Jesus Christ, I'm alive today. And I'm alive today, and I know that with a pulse. You're looking at a testimony of a man who understands the necessity of keeping their finger on the pulse. The pulse of our culture, societal climate, government, country, and the world. But what about the pulse of the church? More specifically, the ever-changing, rapidly growing, pulsating rhythm of the youth culture. You only need to be involved in youth ministry 3 months or so to really recognize and realize that the culture is constantly changing. And so as a youth leader, it can be challenging. It can be a challenge to keep your finger on that pulse. And so this session that you're in right now, we hope that it will equip you with practical information and resources to help you better manage the ever-changing world your young people are living in. In fact, you're living in as well.
Yeah.
So we'll look at 4 simple ways to kind of think about perspective and viewpoints and practical applications to keep your finger on the pulse of today's culture. And all of them come from the Holy Script. So let's take a look at keeping your finger on the pulse.
Welcome to our first topic of Learn and Listen, and this will help you to keep your finger on the pulse.
Yeah. We can learn from healthy resources both inside our organization and outside the UPCI sphere of influence. Now, I will digress for a second. We have some of the most prolific and profound authors, leaders, and personalities in our movement. Voices that project with authority, clarity, and an abundance of wisdom. So take advantage of Pentecostal Publishing House, Link 247, Discipleship Now, and the UPCI Youth Ministries resources like their podcast, Youth Ministry, and Youth Room. All of these exist, and they're there to help you put your finger on the pulse so you kind of know what's going on. However, outside Christian resources are also available. They give us insight on how to stay engaged. For instance, Moses' father-in-law became a resource that's invaluable to Moses and the people he led. Let's read it. In Exodus chapter 18 and verse 13, it reads this way. The next day, Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning until evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, "What is this that you're doing for the people? Why do you sit alone, and all the people stand around from morning until evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people came to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me. And I decide between one person and another, and I make them known the statutes of God's law." And so Moses' father-in-law said to him, "What you're doing, it's not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You're not able to do it." And so the voice of reason and wisdom came from an outside source, just like we can get stuff from an outside source. It did not come from inside their Israelite circle, but from a familiar and reputable source. So listen to reputable youth sources that are in tune with the culture and have the same passion for student care. Yeah. And also, the wisdom was broad. What Jethro had provided, his advice that he gave Moses, it was broad and general. So filtering is of utmost importance. Read, listen, watch, and ingest different material, different lessons, and different approaches. But just like eating some good catfish, and if you've never had good catfish, you've got to learn how to spit out the bones when you eat it. So filter out and engage with outside of Pentecostal influences and resources. Here are a couple of resources, and you'll find some of this in your material that we'll give you, is the Cultural Translator. I receive an email probably once a week, if not more than once a week, and it provides keen foresight on what is weekly happening in an email every week with teens from 12 years old to hyphen age students. Also, there's another magazine that helps us and it's helped me, and I'll read it from time to time, is Focus on the Family's Brio magazine for teen girls. It gives practical advice for cultural relevant topics.
Practically, we are now going to begin to talk about how to listen to your students. Listen to your students, but continue to firmly place their ideologies on truth. Let's go to Matthew 16:13 through 20. He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon, for flesh and blood have not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." So from this scripture reading, we need to give them opportunity to speak about the climate of the culture. Listen intently to what they're saying and how they are saying it. This is helpful information moving forward on how to address the truths society provides. A healthy, practical way to do this is to write what they say down. We take advantage of this through our Breeze system, and we provide notes for follow-ups. If you don't have Breeze, I know there's Evernote, or just going back to the good old-fashioned pen and paper. It gives you a way to stay connected and to your most recent conversation, something to follow up on.
Yeah.
In this context, Jesus provokes his students with an opportunity to tell him of the cultural dynamics of who they thought Jesus was. There was a flurry of answers of their perceptions, yet one ultimate truth had the resolve: Jesus.
Yeah.
The emphasis here is twofold. Lean in and listen to what they say culture is telling them about certain concepts while providing a healthy dose of truth for them to chew on and digest. Without this combination, the learning process becomes one-sided, and students will get blindsided with issues they are unable to process. So listen to them. Keep your finger on the pulse by actively listening to them and leaning in closely to how they are saying it and what they believe about what they are saying. Let's dive into the next section, in, not of.
Yeah, you can be in, not of. Don't shy away from the culture in social media, magazines, articles, podcasts, and platforms. This provides a good resource to facilitate prayer, open conversation, and have dialogue, and guide format your curriculum. Honestly, you don't know what you don't know. So believe me, I get it. There's a line between indulging in certain activities in culture, i.e. social media, with reckless abandon and remaining oblivious to what's going on in the world. In Jesus' prayer concerning his present and future disciples, he prays these words. It's found in John chapter 17 and verse 14. He prayed this: "I have given them your word, and the world has hated them because they are not of the world, just as I am not of the world. I do not ask that you take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one. They are not of the world, just as I am not of this world." And so we make at least three observations from this passage. Number one, Jesus makes the claim that his disciples are not of this world, and we are indeed not of this world. And number two, Jesus says that he has given us his word. Thank God. And this is this is also one of the key contributors of gives us separation, gives us distinction, and he even mentions hate. And so, number three, in his prayer, he makes an astonishing request. He does not ask for his disciples to be removed from the world, but that safety from the evil one would be an option. So here's the point I'm trying to make. The students you teach, most of them, not all, attend public school, and thus they live in the world. They must engage in the public sphere whilst walking separate from culture. So here in Mount Vernon, Ohio, we don't live very far from what they call the Amish country. And the Amish, they live way outside the city limits. Geographically, they live separate world, leading lives in the quiet with no impact to make disciples. And I honestly don't think or believe that Jesus meant or implied that as you were going and as you were going to make disciples, that's what he was talking about. Now, on one occasion, Jesus takes his disciples at the gate of Hades, literally the metropolis of a sinful city in the district of Caesarea Philippi. Probably didn't say it right, but let's call it CP. He does not shy away from the culture, but engages with it. He was not afraid to be in the world, but be absolutely distinguished from it. Proximity does not determine your distinction. Holiness does. Your measure of commitment as a teacher will define you, not where you venture to see the climate of your world your students are living in. Keep your finger on the pulse by engaging the culture. And if you can't outsource the task to someone else, I encourage you to do so.
So I just want to take a few moments and speak practically on this. We are not called to be of this world, but we definitely need to know the world that we live in.
Make it plain.
For instance, our ministry, my husband and I, he does not always have the mental, emotional capacity or tolerance to sit and scroll through the endless vortex of social media.
Can't make me do it.
And I call it breaking the web, trying to learn the up and coming trends of this ever changing generation. But I do. And I check and I view our students frequently.
They know that. They know that.
What do they like on Instagram? Who do they follow? What are people saying about them? These are all important.
Yeah.
Not only checking social media, but I tap into Urban Dictionary to stay up to date on current lingo. It's not necessary to insert that lingo into my daily vocabulary, but to understand the new words that they are using can be helpful in our modern age. To remain current on the pulse, stay current on the vocabulary. As youth leaders, you are trying to be in a world, but not of the world. Take advantage of engaging with the world that we live in for the sake of your students.
Yeah. And so the resources that you use is Facebook, Instagram, TikTok.
Snapchat.
Snapchat. I know that this is a scary place to be, but this is where your students are. And so once again, I'll mention this as we conclude this part is if you don't feel comfortable, find someone who is, that they can report to you, talk to you about what's going on so you can stay up to date on the pulse.
Yes.
So we're on to our next principle about watch and pray. In Matthew chapter 26 and verse 40 through 41, it reads this: "And he came unto his disciples and found them asleep and said unto Peter, What? You could not watch with me for just 1 hour? Watch and pray that ye enter not into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh, well, it's weak." Stay alert. This is the watch section. Watch and stay alert. Be diligent about new cultural trends. Jesus questions Peter and his disciples on their inability to stay awake or be alert of the impending and possible deception of Judas and the progression of his crucifixion. The watch principle has yet another application as well. Jesus said that the spirit was willing, but the flesh, well, it's weak. You know this. I know this. We all know this. A principle we should notice is our desire to keep a finger on the pulse is to also ensure that we have a finger on our own pulse. See, a constant internal heart check for ourselves will also help us readily empathize with students struggling with some of the similar issues that we do every single day. So watch what you preach and teach, because you will indeed need to live it both in their view and outside of their view. You see, you'll lose the pulse of the youth culture if you can't find your own. You'll miss the ever-changing rhythm of the culture because you are preoccupied trying to figure out what's going on with your own heart. It's kind of like David. I would love to tell him, and I've told myself in my youth group, keep your heart. This is a heart check. Stay up to date on you. Just as much as you're trying to stay up to date on the culture, stay up to date on you. Make sure your spiritual software has a daily check. And while watching, while browsing, while swiping, while surfing, while scrolling, keep an eye out of what could potentially tempt your students to fall into sin. You don't necessarily need to be in the know, but take a brief glance every now and then at what's going on in our culture. That can even mean looking up what's going on, a 15-minute podcast about the news. What's going on? How are our students affected by that? What does that look like? And pray. I can't stress this enough. Attached with the watch is also the pray. I want you to recognize he said watch and pray simultaneously. Jesus expected the disciples to do both simultaneously. Prayer gave insight on future problems for Peter, and he was able to voice those to Peter in such a way that assisted Peter for the future. I want you to check this out. So just before Jesus tells Peter he will deny him and the rooster's going to go, cock-a-doodle-doo, right? It's going to do that. Jesus says, and Luke writes this in Luke chapter 22 and verse 31. And this is what it says. It says, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demands, or he demanded to have you sifted as wheat. He wanted to sift you like wheat. But then the Bible says that Jesus prayed. He says, I prayed for you that your faith may not fail. He prayed for Peter for a future event. And then he said, when you have turned again, you're going to help your brothers out. So I want you to understand this. Watch and pray, they are synonymous with this. Jesus' prior prayer saw something spiritual that Peter did not notice and provided helpful application for Peter to follow. Jesus had both prayed and he watched for Peter's soul. In fact, I think it's impossible, or at least counterintuitive, to effectively pray without watching. Without the watching, we don't know what and how to pray. But with the watching, you do. So here's the application. Pray for every single student. Pray for their parents. Pray for their siblings. Pray for the progress in their school. Pray for discipleship. Pray for their emotional well-being, their future aspirations, their appetite, their spiritual appetite, their safety, and their influence. Watch and pray is a part of keeping the finger on the pulse. As a matter of fact, I think it's one of the best ways to keep your finger on the pulse, because you'll have one ear listening to them, like we just talked about, listen and learn, but also you have your ear to him as well. And we want to hear his pulse as well. So that is watch and pray. So where you been?
I've been taking care of the kids. Had a break for lunch.
Oh, so you got things to do?
Got things to do. I'm glad to be back.
We're glad to have you back.
Yes,
I love you, babe.
I love you.
Okay. Hey, we got one more principle to talk to you about, and that is touch 1.
Talk 2.
And touch 3. So here's the biblical precedence for that. Jesus was able to influence. And we're talking about influence, the last part. Really, this whole finger on the pulse is helping us find a way to influence. And so Jesus was able to influence a great amount of people periodically by signs, miracles, and wonders. For instance, the feeding the stadium with fish and chips, or healing withered hands, or blinded eyes, and casting out demons. Your influence as a teacher and disciple will always impact several tens, hundreds, and even thousands, stretching over generations as they listen and watch your example. For instance, you got youth camps, you got conventions, you got Congress, you got rallies, you got Sunday school, you got VBS. You got all these different ways that you minister to people over just one voice over them all. But however, Jesus' long-lasting achievements is found in a few that he focused on and how he invested in them. Jesus talked, and touched with Andrew, Peter, James, and John, often just the 3 or just the 4 of them. Yeah. And you can look up Matthew 17:1, Mark 5:37, Mark 13:3, or Luke 9:28 for some of those. He took them with them on special occasions and invested slightly more time with them than the others. Now, we care for every student in discipleship, and thus we try to connect with them at a heart level. A lot of this has been on a head level, a lot of this has been on a hand level, but some of it's going to be on a heart level. Yep. And we suggest that in order to keep your finger on the pulse, it involves intentional connection. And so this is where you come in.
Yeah. So just to take it from like a practical standpoint, we're going to talk about the Talk 1, which is where we once a week, once a month, whatever your schedule allows, because most of us know that if we're in youth ministry, we might be in music, or we might be in other departments where we can help out. But at least once a month, if not once a week, showing interest and personally investing in your students, time, energy, finances. Some practical things is you just have to know them, like we talked about earlier, whether that's eating, cooking their favorite dinner, taking them out for coffee, shopping, maybe going bowling or golf, or whatever that work looks like to you.
On a budget.
I will say sometimes, like, we have a girl that doesn't always like to eat with us, but like just taking her on a car ride and driving, and sometimes that just breaks down the barrier to have her open up, or sitting at a park. So I would just suggest your homework is figuring out what you can do with your students. The next one is talk to. Talk in person or FaceTime, with everything going on these days. Phone calls are good. 2 students or more per week. Going to sit by them at church. I think we get caught up in the touching every student, hey, God bless you, good to see you, whatever that looks like. But just taking that moment to sit with them and have an intentional conversation before church starts will speak volumes to them, and it will deepen that relationship that you have with that student. And lastly is touch 3. Touch 3 students with a card, a text, an in-person prayer, a word of encouragement, advice. I'm good about just texting. I'm not really good about mailing something, but we do touch with, birthday cards and stuff like that. But your homework also is just to figure out how you can just deepen your relationship with these students. Yeah. And I know that especially with me, I look to my youth pastor on the days when I was in youth group and how he deepened that relationship and built that bridge to where now as a youth minister, not even that, but just as a young adult, I can call him, and when I'm needing help, he's there for me. So.
Yeah, and it can even be mechanical. You can schedule it. Sometimes I will schedule the same student every 2 weeks or the same student every week. And here's the deal. I used to think, well, they're going to know. They're going to know that I'm calling them every Monday, but they don't. They're not going to know. So you can have a system that says I can take one student once a week. I can take one. I can talk to, thank you. I can talk to 2 students a week, and that can be a text, and that can be, or touch them in such a way that's kind of an in-person. I know at times that it's been difficult in the past, and so trying to figure out ways to communicate with them is part of the deal. So that's what we've been talking about today. We've talked about learning and listening with your students. We've talked about in and not of. You don't want to be in the world, but we are in the world, but we're not of this world. And watch and pray, and then we're also ending with
the practical level of taking 2, touching 3, and
man, what is it, baby? If we're gonna tell people how to do it, we gotta do it right. So here it is. We're ready. Is take 1,
talk 2, and touch 3.
Touch 3. Well, it's been fun. So let's conclude with this. The pulse is the indicator that helps us determine the health of whatever it is we're trying to keep the pulse on. Keeping the finger on the pulse of culture is not arbitrary because it simultaneously helps us keep. It's all right. Helps us keep the finger on the pulse of the students. We hope this brief overview does exactly what my son did.
Real life.
Put the pieces together for you guys.
Yes.
And so we hope that youth ministry, equipping young disciples to impact the generation now and currently engage in their culture. We hope that this helped with everything. And this is just life. It's just